We can hear you, but I think you're using my name at the moment.
I'm gonna
Nice to
rename
meet you, Matthew.
it. I don't know what happened. I think I sent you the wrong link, Lisa. It's okay. Okay, so we are now
Here, but I think you're using my name at the moment.
Now I'm me again. Thanks.
Good to see you, Lisa.
You too.
we are now live on YouTube, so we should be making the transition to the website in just a moment.
Okay.
All righty. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Queens Borough President Hybrid Land Use Public Hearing. This hearing is taking place both in person in the Borough President's Conference Room at 120-55 Queens Boulevard in Kew Gardens and on our website at www.queensbp.org. I am Queens Borough President Donovan Richard Jr., and I will be chairing this land use public hearing. For those who wish to testify virtually and haven't already pre-registered to do so, please visit www.queensbp.org/land use. If you are attending our public hearing in person, please see our staff to sign up for public speaking time if you have not already done so. Please note your opportunity to speak will follow those who are pre-registered. Written testimony is welcome from those who are unable to testify. All written testimony must be received by 5 p.m. today and may be submitted by email to planning@queensbp.org or by conventional mail sent to the office of the Queensborough President at 120-55 Queens Boulevard, room 226, Kew Gardens, New York, 11424. With that being said, Lisa, please review how this public hearing will proceed.
Thank you. The public hearing shall be conducted in the following manner. The applicant will be called to give a description of the zoning action requested, an explanation of the proposed project, and respond to any questions from the chair. The floor will then be open for public speakers. Please listen for your name to be called. Each speaker will have 2 minutes. A signal will be heard and notice will be displayed when 2 minutes have passed. When you are called, please identify yourself for the record, and if you are formally speaking as a representative or member of a group, the calendar number or application you're speaking about, and whether you are for or against the item. Then you may begin your testimony. At the discretion of the chair, if there are a large number of speakers on any particular item, it may be put on second call. Speakers for and against that item may be also called to testify on an alternating basis. Please note that if you are testifying virtually, you must keep your camera on during your testimony and display your name accurately on Zoom. If at any point you have any technical issues, please let the planning staff know in the chat and we will assist you. Thank you for your cooperation.
Thank you, Lisa. You have just been advised on the proceedings of this hearing and how it will be conducted. Please keep your comments focused on the application you are speaking about, and please stay within the allotted 2 minutes. When you hear the signal, please wrap up and finish your comments. Oh, I think I'm reading the wrong thing. All right. All right. Well, anyway, that's just to clarify the rules again. And the chair, of course, reserves the right to ask speakers for clarifications or further information regarding the applications or comments. Actually, I think I'm reading the right thing. But anyway, Lisa, please call the first calendar item while I get a cup of coffee.
Certainly. Calendar items number 1 and 2 are related items. ULURP action N240010ZRY and N240011ZRY. The applicant is New York City Department of City Planning. For consideration, all citywide action. Please begin.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you, Mr. Borough President, for having us this morning. My name is Matt Waskevitz. I am a senior planner here at the Department of City Planning, and I'm the project manager on the City of Yes for Economic Opportunity. I have about 15 minutes worth of presentation, which should leave ample time for both public questions and testimony. And with that, I will share my screen. Okay. So City of Yes for Economic Opportunity is one of 3 citywide initiatives we have here at the Department of City Planning to modernize and update our city zoning regulations to support small businesses, to create affordable housing, and to promote sustainability. It's part of Mayor Eric Adams' vision for a more inclusive and equitable City of Yes. City of Yes for Economic Opportunity is the second in sequence of citywide reforms to our zoning resolution. The other 2 proposals, City of Yes for Carbon Neutrality, which was recently adopted by the City Council, was and is designed to help meet New York City meet its ambitious goal of reducing carbon emissions 80% by 2050 by updating zoning to make it easier to green our buildings, our streets, and our city. The third in sequence is City of Yes for Housing Opportunity, which is an inclusive citywide approach to our city's housing crisis. It aims to expand and diversify our housing supply and ensure that every neighborhood does its part to help meet housing needs and provide equitable housing access to all New Yorkers. So that proposal is expected to enter the formal public review later this spring. But before we dive into the policy itself, I think it's helpful to go over what zoning governs when it comes to our city's businesses. Zoning defines hundreds of what we consider to be uses or business types, sorts them by zoning district, and regulates things like what kind of business activities you can do in your space and how big you can be. And in many cases, the way that our zoning regulates businesses, it hasn't been updated since the 1961 zoning resolution. And so there are lots of outdated and sometimes counterproductive regulations on business activity. For example, preventing a bar or restaurant from advertising the time that a band might perform or comedy, or setting a strict square footage cap on how much a bakery can devote to baking. And so knowing that our zoning for business was in need of a refresh, we've been on a listening tour, spending much of the last year and a half asking small business owners, chambers of commerce, business improvement districts, industrial service providers, and residents across our city ways that our zoning might be getting in the way of establishing or expanding small businesses. As we were going through this, we were asking folks what they'd heard about ways that the zoning was creating a barrier. We then started having an iterative process where we built more reforms to our zoning. And throughout the last year and a half, we were also having public information sessions with members of the public community board members and really trying to understand the balance between making sure that as we're updating our regulations for small businesses, it keeps in mind quality of life for our residents. And so the proposals that we have been shaped by what we've heard and through this year and a half of engagement and process. So a lot of what we've heard is that, let's face it, New York City can be a very challenging place to run a business. And dealing with government regulation, it's often frustrating or slow or confusing or just simply illogical. And the result of all this red tape can make investing or starting a new business hard. And that in turn contributes to a city that's less vibrant, fewer people able to start a new business, one more vacant storefront, one more business that has to leave their neighborhood or the city overall, just to be able to expand. And because many of our rules governing businesses are more than 60 years old, they're holding our businesses back, either restricting them outright from locating or regulating how they do business with some sort of old or complicated rule that's just not clear. And all of this costs our small businesses time and money, and it's fundamentally inequitable because it's hard to understand where you can go and what you can do. So our overarching vision for this work is to make sure that our zoning works for our economy and not against it. And a result of this zoning reform, we would like to have zoning that's more simple, more adaptable, and more modern. So how do we achieve this? We have 4 goals for this work. The first, we want to make it easier for businesses to find space and grow. The main way we propose to do this is by lifting zoning barriers so businesses can be closer to their customers. Across New York City, we have more than 17,000 vacant storefronts. We have tens of millions of square feet of empty offices, and there are many ways in which our zoning makes it harder to fill this empty space. So our proposals in Goal 1 are focused right on that. Goal number 2, we want to support growing industries by reducing obstacles for emerging business types. These are ways in which our zoning is unclear or getting in the way of a type of business that's starting to emerge. And so we want to address these obstacles so that businesses can thrive across our city. Third, we want to enable more business-friendly streetscapes, ensuring that businesses contribute to more safe, active, and walkable streets. Fourth, and finally, we want to create new opportunities for businesses to open the future. So this is about updating our zoning toolkit so that we can boost job growth and business expansion across Queens and across the rest of our city too. So there are 18 proposals. I'll go through them very, very quickly, high level. But as I'm going through, we have lots of resources on our website, nyc.gov/yes economic opportunity, that goes far more into depth on each of what I'll go through now. So goal 1 is all about making it easier for businesses to find space and grow. And because the rules that we haven't been looked at in many cases for small businesses since the early 60s, it's long past due to update our zoning to reflect and respond to today's economy. So our first 6 proposals are designed to do exactly that and make our zoning more simple, more adaptable, and more modern so that businesses can more easily locate and grow. Proposal 1, storefronts that are deemed non-conforming, they're located in a residential area, they face in some cases an arbitrary 2-year time clock for reactivation, or else they have to remain vacant. And this is a direct contributor to storefront vacancy across our city. So what we're proposing here is in the places where that 2-year time clock exists, to lift it so that we can have vacant storefronts become more easily reoccupied. Proposal 2 is about the places in our city where we have similar kinds of zoning districts that may, in many cases across Queens, be located on the same street, along the same corridor, or even on opposite sides of the same street, and yet the kinds of business types that they allow are different. And this is both outdated and confusing that routinely holds back business expansion and location. For example, in many places, you can have bike sales on either side of the street, but if you want to rent your bicycles, you might have to locate on one side and not the other. If you want to have a dance studio, you might be able to locate on one side and not the other. If you want to have a movie theater, you might be able to locate on one side and not the other. So this is the kind of zoning rules that we want to have simplified, and simplify the differences between similar zoning districts, make it easier for businesses to know where they can locate, and make it easier for residents to understand the rules as well. Proposal 3. Despite changes in technology and a vastly different economy today, our zoning rules for clean production businesses are stuck in the mid-20th century. And so our zoning today allows for some kinds of manufacturing in along commercial corridors, but many other things like pottery studios or bakeries or coffee roasters, microbreweries, jewelry makers, apparel designers, 3D printers, and the like are not allowed in most storefront space or office space. We'd like to allow them at a small scale, provided that they meet stringent standards for environmental standards to make sure that they're being safe, locating near residential and commercial areas. But we think this would make a big difference in allowing New Yorkers to make things and sell them in the same space. Proposal 4. If one of the clean production businesses I just mentioned wanted to move into an empty office building, today they face rules that might require them to add additional loading docks, even if they don't need them, even if the building can't physically accommodate them. So what we want to do here is allow for older commercial buildings to change over time, not mandating that a building tear apart the ground floor just to provide new loading docks for a business that may not even need it. Proposal 5. Zoning today allows for many buildings to have a mix of residential and commercial uses, but sometimes zoning restricts the ability for this mix to locate on upper floors. Now, this limits options for new buildings to be built that are mixed use, but it also limits the ability for older commercial, particularly office buildings, to adapt over time and include some residential use. So what we want to do here is enable renovations or new construction of mixed-use buildings in places where it makes sense, allowing commercial uses at the same level or above residences, provided that there's complete separation between these uses. And for many uses, there would also be stringent sound standards to make sure that the activity that's going on doesn't affect the neighbors. Proposal 6 is about the terms we use in our zoning to classify businesses, and it's full of things like typewriter repair, but it doesn't say where a cell phone repair shop could go. So we want to update the terms we use and simplify and modernize them so it's more clear on where you can locate and what you can do. On to our second goal. We want to support growing industries by reducing obstacles in zoning for emerging business types. So each of the industries highlighted in the second goal are facing ambiguity or outdated restrictions in our zoning that we want to address so we can help these emerging business types thrive across our city and create good jobs. Now, these are not the only emerging industries in our city. There are many others, but these are ones that through the last year and a half of engagement and outreach, we've identified a specific zoning barrier or just confusion that we want to clear up. Proposal 7 is around urban agriculture. So you can have agriculture such as hydroponics in a greenhouse today in any commercial area. But if you want to do the same thing that you would do in a greenhouse, but have it be located in a building, the zoning says you can't do that. And so we want to make it clear that indoor agriculture is allowed in commercial areas so that more food can be grown closer to where people live. Proposal 8 is on life sciences. Laboratories today face confusing and outdated rules that can slow the development of new facilities. What we're doing here is making it clear that labs without the potential for environmental hazards are appropriate in office settings. We'd also expand where an existing special permit could be used so that laboratories might be able to locate in the future closer to research centers like hospitals and universities. Proposal 9 is about nightlife. Today in our zoning, any bar or restaurant in the city, you can have live music and have a concert up to 200 people. But oftentimes you can't have people dance to that music in the same space. And oftentimes you can't have live comedy or open mic nights in the same space where you can already have live music. And a lot of these restrictions really go back to the Prohibition era and the city's notorious and discriminatory cabaret laws that were used to shut down business types where dancing was happening. So what we're doing here is we're simplifying the rules so they're based on the size of the venue rather than the activity. So where you can have live music today, in the future, you could dance to that music. You could also have comedy and open mic nights. What this proposal does not do is make any changes to the adult use regulations. There's been some confusion and misinformation out there about this, but for businesses that are having dancing, we want to allow for that at a small scale and do away with the last parts of the cabaret laws. So small businesses located along commercial corridors, larger businesses and venues could only be located in office districts or in industrial areas. Proposal 10 is around experiential businesses and amusements. Zoning is very clear that you can have something like a tennis court in most places, but it's a lot less clear on other kinds of businesses that didn't exist 60 years ago, like virtual reality or escape rooms or laser tag. So what we want to do here is both simplify and modernize how zoning treats amusements and recreational activities, allow these business types indoors and at a small scale along neighborhood commercial streets, and at a larger scale in office districts. Proposal 11. Many New Yorkers start their business in the home. It's a really important way in the life cycle of a business to start your home. And then as you grow, you're able to go to a storefront or an office space. And our zoning today allows for many kinds of home businesses. You could be a lawyer, you could be a jewelry maker, you could be a music teacher, have people visit you in your home. But there are also important safeguards around being a good neighbor. So you, for example, today, you can't sell anything you didn't make on site. You can't be a retail business. You have up to one employee that doesn't live with you, but you can't have more than that. But there are some restrictions here. And most importantly, you can't do anything that would create a nuisance. So any sort of noise or odor or dust or anything that starts affecting the neighbors, you can be shut down for that activity. So there are important safeguards today around home businesses, but there are also ways that the pandemic changed the way that New Yorkers work from home, but zoning hasn't kept up. For example, the zoning prohibits specific occupations like barbers and interior designers. It also holds back some kinds of business creation by limiting that one employee or limiting the square footage that you can have in a way that is often too small for folks. So what we're proposing is to enable entrepreneurship with modern rules for home-based businesses. So we would expand from 1 to 3 employees outside that are allowed to be in a home-based business. We would allow an expansion of the square footage associated with a home-based business. But most importantly, we'd keep in place all of the safeguards that exist today. around environmental, around making sure that you're not creating a nuisance, that you're not selling anything you didn't make, and that most importantly, you're a housing unit first. You have to live there, and the business activity still can only be, the way the zoning defines it, as incidental to the business, to that being a home. So these are all really important safeguards we're keeping in place while making some tweaks around the edges to make sure that home-based businesses are allowed to expand entrepreneurship across Queens and across our city. Goal 3, we want to encourage more business-friendly streetscapes. We know that economic vibrancy isn't just what occurs inside a building, but also how a business interacts with its surroundings. Now, in our zoning, we have inconsistency in existing streetscape regulations, or in some case, a total absence of zoning rules. And so what these proposals here, we want to make sure that we are having businesses contribute to active, safe, and walkable streets. Proposal 12. Streetscape conditions like a long blank wall or a drive-through can sometimes break up retail character of streets and create unpleasant and sometimes even unsafe conditions for people walking past. In many parts of Queens, we don't have any rules whatsoever that prevent new buildings that make conditions even worse. So what we're proposing here is a more consistent, easy to understand baseline set of ground floor design, one that would enhance our city's retail and commercial corridors, and ones that are more responsive in areas with greater pedestrian activity and more relaxed in the city's auto-oriented corridors. Proposal 13. Auto servicing and repair businesses, they're typically treated as industrial businesses, and they're typically located far away from retail streets and residential neighborhoods. But some exceptions in our zoning exist today. And in some cases, auto repair business activity spills out into the sidewalk, out into the street. This can create conflicts with other vehicles. This can create conflicts with pedestrians and cyclists. So what we're proposing here is to rationalize, consolidate auto servicing into 2 categories: light auto repair and heavy auto repair. Heavy auto repair would be licensed by the state DMV, and it's continued to be allowed without restriction in industrial areas. But light auto repair could locate in commercial areas, but only after appealing to the Board of Standards and Appeals for site plan review. Proposal 14. So if you're the federal government, you can do delivery activity at any place. This is a post office. They're important neighborhood hubs for parcel delivery and pickup. But if you're not the federal government, zoning does not allow for that same kind of delivery activity within buildings, except in an industrial area. This forces activity to occur oftentimes on sidewalks and streets. It leads to more traffic congestion, more emissions, and the status quo as people get more and more deliveries just doesn't work anymore. So what we're proposing here is to create a new type of business use in our zoning called a micro distribution facility, allow these businesses to locate at a small scale in commercial areas. This would encourage deliveries to shift to alternative modes of transportation, and it would regulate the creation of new kinds of local hubs for safe and sustainable deliveries to occur. I'll wrap up with our 4th and final goal. It's about creating new opportunities for businesses to open in the future, establishing kinds of zoning tools, all of which do go through public review, so these are not as of right, ways that could boost job growth and business expansion in the future. So our zoning resolution, it contains many kinds of tools which could be used to initiate a discretionary public review process to change an area's underlying zoning regulations. These include special permits from the Board of Standards and Appeals, City Planning Commission authorizations and special permits, and of course, zoning districts themselves. So as we're seeking to modernize our city zoning to support small business location and growth, we also want to update our zoning toolkit so that businesses can have better access to pathways that enable their expansion or adaptation. So that's what these last 4 proposals are all about. They all create new kinds of discretionary zoning tools for future economic success of our city. Proposal 15. Many large-scale residential developments are zoned as residence districts, meaning that forms of retail, services, and makerspace cannot easily locate, and it places residents of these developments further away from local goods, services, and opportunity to grow new business or to have jobs. So this proposal creates a new kind of discretionary zoning tool called a CPC authorization that could allow for a limited amount of commercial or makerspace in existing or new construction on a large-scale residential campus. This could be underutilized office or storage space along a ground floor, for example. And this could give residents greater access to basic necessities or space to grow new business. Proposal 16. Some portions of New York City and some portions of Queens are not within walking distance of a local retail store, and zoning has no pathways. Potentially allow a new locally serving business to open, or to allow an existing business to adapt over time, or to be able to change their activities. So what we're doing here is creating a discretionary pathway where a business could initiate a process to potentially locate a new store located on the corner of an intersection, provided that that commercial space does not generate any environmental concerns or traffic congestion. I'll note, because we've received some questions and concerns about this from Queens residents and community members, that this process is not as of right and would require environmental review and would also require going before the community board as a part of the public process here. Proposal 17 is about some instances where businesses lack options for waiving certain smaller zoning rules. For example, a film studio struggles to build a soundstage because of rules like the yard requirements or the heights that the building can be, and it makes it hard to build a new film studio. Or a clothing store might want to expand and take over an empty storefront nearby, but it can't do that because it's size limited. So what we're doing here is expanding our zoning toolkit so businesses could initiate a process to waive some zoning rules on a case-by-case basis. Lastly, in some instances, it's our zoning districts, not the pathways to modify them, that are obsolete. This is particularly true of our city's manufacturing or M district zoning designations. And currently, low density options, physical design rules, and high parking can make it impossible to build new loft-like industrial buildings, even in areas where they exist historically. And so this proposal creates a range of new zoning districts and a range of densities and heights to expand the zoning toolkit for the future. So I'll close by sharing a roadmap for the process to come. After more than a year and a half of getting in front of as many audiences as we can, presenting our ideas, hearing theirs, and really trying to iterate the creation of these proposals, we're in the formal public review process. We're going out to community boards each and every night. I know there were several meetings in Queens last night alone, and so this process culminates with a CPC, or City Planning Commission, public hearing on January 24th, followed by a vote from the City Planning Commission. And if the City Planning Commission votes to approve these proposals or some version of these proposals, they would then go on to the City Council for consideration later this spring. We're accepting recommendations and votes from community board members at least through the beginning of February to make sure that everyone has ample time to review. We have many resources on our website to help New Yorkers understand more about these proposals. These range from looking at storefront vacancy across every community district in their city, as well as jobs, looking at each of the 18 proposals I just mentioned in far more detail. For those more technically inclined, we can both translate each of the 18 proposals to the specific zoning sections that we're referencing, as well as comments and annotations on the zoning text itself. We have much more detail on the rationale and background behind these zoning changes and research through our project description. And then related to one of the proposals, each and every business type or use that we've translated it into the future. So if you do typewriter repair as a business, we're not eliminating your ability to locate. We'll just consider you something different in the future, and you can find that there. And then to help folks organize their feedback, we're providing an optional worksheet to help structure this. So with that, thank you so much for your time, and I'd welcome any questions that you have.
All right, thank you for your testimony. Let me start off with this question. So I know that there were several boards that heard your application. What were their biggest concerns on 7, 8, 9, and 11 who voted unfavorably?
Sure. From my understanding, some of the concerns that we've heard from Queens community boards have to do with perceptions of the difference between commercial zoning and residential zoning, and the concern that some of these proposals may lead to more commercial activity happening within residentially zoned areas. So that's one concern that we've heard, and the related very much concern to that would be just general residential quality of life and making sure that the city and has enforcement in place to make sure that as we're changing our zoning, that when a business isn't being a good neighbor, that enforcement processes are followed, that they work, that the agencies that have them have the support that they need in order to ensure that that enforcement works. So to provide you with two quick examples, we've heard some concern around the corner store proposal. Admittedly, some of the concern from this proposal, I think, comes from the idea that it might be far more widespread than, or in fact, even as of right, when the proposal has a very high bar for being able to be used. and we think would only be used in cases where there is community support. But the concern around allowing any kind of new retail space in a place that's zoned as residential is something we've heard. We understand that concern. What I would say,
So
Mr. Borough President.
just
Oh,
go
go
through
ahead.
that. So you said you would only hear that if you would only support an application like that if it had community support. What does that mean?
That's one of the recommendations that we heard. The way that we're thinking about this and the way that the proposal was created is that the City Planning Commission has specific what it calls findings. So if someone were to use the corner store proposal and they were to go through their environmental review and they were to go before the community board and the community board said, we like the idea of this, but we're afraid that in the future your corner store could turn into something that we don't like. It's our understanding that the City Planning Commission could hear that finding and provide restrictions on the future use of that site. So that's why we think that this proposal is responsive to community input, but that is certainly a concern that we heard from some parts of Queens that had voted no against the proposal.
And let me go into NYCHA now. How would you notify NYCHA residents of the possibilities of having additional commercial spaces in their developments? And let me put on the record that I've been supportive of this from the days of me being the zoning chair at the city council. I think it's long past the time we give NYCHA residents an opportunity to hone in their crafts around, all of the different talents that they have. So I wanted to just hear a little bit more about what does that notification look like?
Mm-hmm.
And then also, is there any interagency coordination to ensure that one, when the notification goes out, will there be services attached? So will the Department of Small Business Services be a part of this conversation of ensuring that we can maximize opportunities for NYCHA residents? So I know the zoning tool is great, them being able to now have an opportunity to have commercial on the campus, but what does that look like in cultivating the many talents that are in these developments?
Yeah, thank you for the question and for your testimony on this as well, because our primary goal with this kind of proposal is to give NYCHA and others a tool that could be used in the future to facilitate space. This proposal in and of itself does not facilitate that space. It is not in the zoning term as of right. And so it is not the case that every campus might be able to use this proposal for various reasons. But in the cases where it is, we've been working very closely with NYCHA, but also with HPD, with SBS, and others in the way in which a tool like this could be utilized, particularly to allow for things like entrepreneurial space. We know, and there's a recent study from the Center for an Urban Future around the need for particularly shared commercial kitchen space for food entrepreneurs at NYCHA, the need for grocery space at NYCHA. It's very clear that this need is needed, and this proposal allows for that opportunity. But as you note, there's so much more that we need to make sure that we're doing, that alongside the use of this tool, that the services that are attached to it are holistic. So I just want to be clear on what the zoning can do and what the zoning cannot do. But we've been working very closely with our city agency partners to make sure that while the opportunity is there, that we're looking at this holistically.
And if you have not had Miss Lolita's buttermilk chicken, you're losing out in NYCHA. Let me ask you this too. So with the RAD developments, how does that work in, as we look at RAD between public and private partnership, would this same zoning be applicable to the RAD deals?
It's a good question. And we created the tool to be flexible in the sense that you could apply the square footage for commercial or maker space to both existing floor plate or potential a new floor plate. We don't make a determination in the potential use of that tool, but it would be up to whether it's NYCHA or any sort of applicant of new space to determine how the tool might be used.
Right. So I think we would want a lot more clarification around what that looks like. So for instance, in the Rockaways, we have Ocean Bay houses, which, when we did the RAD deal, we certainly had the developer selected, but then we also ensured that NYCHA still held on to the land. And I know every deal is different. So we would want to hear a little bit more clarification on some of these deals that, or
Absolutely.
even infill as we move forward. And then just speak to your outreach or notification effort on that. So you would have to, would there be a hearing held at the NYCHA development if something went through, or what does that, how do you envision that process looking?
Yeah. Great question. So the way that the tool as it's currently proposed envisions it is that the applicant, and let's assume in this case it is NYCHA, they would have to go through an environmental review because they're allowing for new kinds of activity that don't exist today. So they would have to look at traffic, noise, air quality, everything that comes along with that. After that point, and when they would get to the point of beginning the formal public review process, they would then go before the community board as they would with any other sort of land use change. Now, notably in the tool right now, there's not the requirement that NYCHA is engaged up into NYCHA residents are engaged before that point, but I think it is a almost certainty that there would not be a process that began public review without first engaging with NYCHA residents. Now, I think this is a place where we should think about the future use of the tool, the other kinds of ways in which it might be used. We've talked with NYCHA about that, but I think we would welcome, especially given your experience, Mr. Borough President, your recommendations and suggestions on this to make sure that it's responsive to exactly what your concerns are here.
Perfect. And we would want to see notification on the earlier end because we know that historically NYCHA residents have not had access and opportunity, and because of that, things move fast, and we don't want things to move so fast that they're behind the 8 ball. So I think the earlier the notification, the better, so that they can be prepared for these opportunities. So that'll be something we definitely hone in on our recommendation. I want to go to, I want to go to proposal 13, and this is of specific interest to me because there's always conflicts between auto repair businesses and pedestrians on commercial streets, and even on my travels here up Merrick Boulevard, sometimes to avoid the Van Wyck at all costs. There's always this constant conflict. Can you just speak to how does this proposal help to mitigate open space and returning our streets back to pedestrians in a safe manner?
Happy to. So there are some forms today of auto repair that are allowed in commercial areas. Most forms are not, notably. And our experience in looking at this and speaking with stakeholders across the city is that oftentimes the kinds of auto repair that are allowed in commercial areas, that activity is spilling out, as you noted, into the sidewalk, into the street. And so what this proposal says is that if an auto repair business is to locate a commercial district in the future, a new one, then they would have to go through site plan review with the Board of Standards and Appeals that requires the business activity to locate within the zoning lot itself. So that could be on an open part of the lot, that could be within a building and closed completely. But the idea is that the zoning would require it to go off the curb, off the sidewalk. And notably, because it's Board of Standards and Appeals, it's not an indefinite license. So they have to come up for renew. And there is that enforcement built in to say that if the business is not following the rules, they can have their allowance revoked.
Oh boy, I wish these rules were in place a long time ago. And then just going to the M districts, so with the M1A core districts, and I did a lot of work around the manufacturing stuff in the council as well. How do you see preservation in housing when it comes to manufacturing districts with this proposal?
Sure. Thank you for the question, in part because I didn't get to that next level of detail in my overview. So we're creating a suite of new kinds of industrial zoning tools, and we really see them working in tandem. And this is modeled after some work we've done quite a bit in North Brooklyn, where the idea of having a core preservation manufacturing district, having a transition district where you see room for essentially the incentivizing the creation of new industrial space, and then you see a growth tool that really modernizes our current M1 or light industrial districts. All three of these tools we see working in tandem. In fact, there's a council bill that has us looking at where each of these tools might be appropriate in each of the city's industrial business zones in the coming years. So we're hard at work on that, and another part of my unit's work stream right now. And we've been working very closely with the city council, with industrial service providers to make sure we get these tools right, because they're citywide tools. We're creating them at a range of densities and heights, but when it comes to preservation and growth, we see in just about every single industrial area of our city a place where we could see each of these tools being working in tandem.
That's my questions. I think all of these proposals make a lot of sense. I think and I think that you clarified a lot on the residential and the commercial piece, which I think coming out of the pandemic, everybody's fostering their entrepreneurial spirit, and zoning is critical certainly in unlocking the potential, especially in this borough that continues to grow. So I think this definitely. These are just common sense measures that should have been enacted perhaps 40 years ago, and we wouldn't be here. Let me go to my staff. I don't know if Vicky or Lisa have any questions.
Thank you, Borough President. No questions at this time. I think we could move on to public testimony. And I believe we have one person testifying in person. That's Walter Sanchez, the Community Board 5 Land Use Committee Chair.
Oh, you go up there. Yeah.
Hi, thanks. My name is Walter Sanchez. I live in Maspeth, and I'm the first vice chair of Community Board 5. Chairman and have been for over a decade now, and I'm here to report for Community Board 5. We're back and forth on these proposals. To go for the 18 building anecdotes that they gave us and each one.
Sorry, I just want to. We're having a little difficulty hearing you, Walter, on the microphone. I'm sorry. I just want to note that for our tech team.
Or take this. I'll take this. Okay.
I mean, that zoning that was done 60 years ago needs to be changed. It's our unfortunately, people have to hire $20,000 to make a living. It's ridiculous, and it takes a lot of time. So to be changed. 60 years ago, zoning was done when land was kind of walked around Ridgewood and Village, which took a to those blocks, from city planning. It's hard to do this.
Five meetings or so that we've had up on this thing. Apparently, they've had this out since 2022, and I don't know anybody who was contacted to help and do the outreach on this. We didn't hear about this till about 3 months ago, and 3 months is really not enough time to make recommendations. So we decided to just say no to the whole thing. So we oppose the city a yes, because this plan severely limits the input from neighborhoods and community boards in planning. Commercial uses are limited and prohibited. This plan further allows some real undesirable uses on commercial development in residential blocks. That's our main thing. We see Middle Village and Maspeth and Ridgewood as being somewhat mostly residential. And when you mix commercial, a dog groomer, a barber in an apartment building or in a residential block that might be doing business till 3 a.m, 2 a.m, yeah, you could restrict time. We see that as a real blight to some of our neighborhoods. And I'm a business person. I'm not sure if any other business people were involved in doing this, but we think you should go back to the drawing board, take your time, go over each of these 18 resolutions one at a time and involve more of us. So thank you. That's my presentation.
Thank you, Walter. All right, going back to you, Vicky.
I believe that was the only person signed up to testify that is here today. So I just want to give one last chance to anyone in the conference room. Going once, going twice. I think we can move ahead for our president.
Okay, and I guess I would want city planning just to respond to that on outreach if they could.
Sure. Regrettably, I think I heard only the last 30 seconds of the testimony, but happy to respond to what I heard, and I think that part was on outreach.
Yeah, basically, I don't think.
Hold
I'm
on,
sorry,
Walter.
I still can't.
Yeah, the mic is, something's up with the mic.
Yeah, I know you got two.
We don't think city planning really did the outreach to the appropriate people. I don't know anybody who was engaged in this process before 3 months ago. And nobody I know knows anybody who was engaged in this process. And zoning takes a long time. It's been 60 years. And sure, a lot of it's archaic, but we're against it because we think you guys should take your time, go back to the drawing board. We don't know any community boards in Queens that are in favor of it. I don't want to speak for them, but we're not in favor of this.
Yeah. Thank you for your question and concern, and I'm glad I could hear that one.
And he also mentioned Barbara's like a residential block, and I think you went through that in your testimony. So you can just speak to that again and clarify.
Okay. So I'll talk about outreach and then home occupation. So on outreach, we've been very engaged for well over a year and a half now, and we made a concerted effort to reach out to all 59 community boards even before we had any formal proposals in the middle of 2022, and making sure that each of the district managers and each of the board chairs were aware of public information sessions. So we had them even before we had proposals. We just had questions. We had some examples of where zoning we had heard that zoning was getting in the way of small business creation. We were asking if we had these right, if there were others. We have recordings of those information sessions on our website with attendees from across the city. And so as we were doing this, we were also working with merchant associations, business improvement districts, the people who do specialized work for our cities, all 5 chambers of commerce who do specialized work helping small businesses navigate the rules, starting to develop other zoning proposals. And so a lot of this work was happening in earnest throughout 2022. And then as 2023 started, we started to craft what we thought were some draft proposals. So we went back to all 59 community boards, to those public information sessions, and then had an opportunity both in the summer of 2023, early summer, and then in the fall as we had the proposals almost finalized but ready to go. And then a full month before the public review started, we put out the draft text itself. This is the first time, at least in my time at city planning, we've done something like that because we wanted the general public to respond. And so, again, we had a letter from our commissioner, Dan Garodnick, going out to all 59 community boards and notifying of this draft text more than a full month before the public review began. So that's just a little bit about the process, engaging with community boards directly.
God, it's a lot.
Walter, it's hard for us to hear the mic because it's too close to your mouth. You gotta.
I'm aware of how and when they were contacted, and it was very recent, and there was very little input there. I agree with it, yes. And it's frightening that you feel you did enough outreach. That's all I've got to say. I mean, you really hadn't, not since May of 2022. And I feel you really should get that input. That's why community boards are here. That's why borough president's offices are here. You hadn't gotten that input. So, okay.
I understand. Thank you.
Let's speak to the residential piece.
Sure.
Again, you mentioned Barbara. It's in the mid block.
Yeah. So the zoning today, it allows for pretty much any occupation or business to be allowed in the home except for a specific list of business types, and that includes barbers, it includes interior designers, and it includes business types that are listed in our zoning today as being not allowed. It was our, again, outreach, speaking with people like the Department of Buildings and understanding how they regulate and enforce this, speaking with groups like the Freelancers Union to really understand people doing work from home now in a post-COVID world. And also the reality of during the pandemic, many people were getting their hair cut in their homes, and that kind of activity has continued. And in all of these instances, we wanted to make sure that that list of specifically prohibited occupations was removed so that you could be a barber in the home, while making sure that all of the safeguards we have around creating a nuisance are still in place. So yes, you could be a barber in the home under this proposal, but you could not be a barber in the home that would be creating noise or odors or any sort of particulate matter that could be a resulting nuisance for your neighbors. So we feel, and it's our understanding through speaking with the enforcement part of our city agency family, that the regulations work, and that allowing, for example, a barber or an interior designer is both common sense and also long overdue, especially in light of the fact that this has been happening a lot already.
Oh, that just brought back a memory because I became a barber to my how old was he? About 5 or 6, and he cried through the entire haircut because he said, "Daddy, you're not a barber. You're a daddy." Yikes, it was rough. Um, with that being said, I want to thank City Planning for coming out. Our next scheduled hybrid land use public hearing is Thursday, February 1st, 2024, starting at 9:30 a.m. I want to thank all that joined us, and I look forward to certainly reviewing some things that some of the boards brought up and then issuing a recommendation on this. But a lot of this seems to be common sense as well. So thank you for your work on this, and we look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Have a good day.